Let's go to Radio Free Skaro, he says. The people are 600 feet tall. You have to talk to them in hot air balloons, and the guest studio is made out of one of their hats, he says. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't see any huge hats.
Giles, Paul, this could be the most exciting thing I've ever seen.
You're kidding.
How can you be excited about a rubbish podcast in a rubbish studio?
Because, assembled podcasters, this is not Something Who. This has just been made to sound like Something Who. The craftsmanship involved. Can you imagine?
What? Then where are we?
I don't know. Something must have yanked us off course. Look at the detail on that white noise.
Right, but who would mock up Something Who?
Our listener, maybe, trying to recreate the source of our creativity.
Our what?
More like the source of our...
Like when the fans create TARDIS consoles in Minnesota. Whoever made these knobs and sliders, I'm shaking his stroke her hand stroke tentacle.
Have you seen these? Look at the labels underneath. J.R. Brevity.
Tim? Too slow?
Richard, nobody's listening.
Giles, inaccuracy.
Paul, causing offence. What does it mean?
I don't know. Let's find out. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to what's quite literally episode 5 of Something Who.
Wow.
It's not actually our 5th episode, though, because, we did that one on Terrance Dicks. And then there was also that one that I did with Tim a while back.
You cheated on us with another podcaster.
Yeah. So it's about the 7th or 8th. But anyway, episode 5. And today we're going to be looking at the Horns of Nimon, which is an exciting moment for me because I'd never seen it before.
Oh,
Blimey,
good Lord, really? Okay.
Could you imagine that? A man of my age never having seen the Horns of Nimon. And also, the God Complex.
Ah. 2 loads of bull in one podcast.
Yeah, it's perfect for us, isn't it? So anyway, keen-eared listeners will already have heard that we have in our presence Paul. Hello,
Yes,
Paul.
you have us, me.
And indeed Giles.
Hello there. Has Paul started using the royal we now?
Well, I hear that he's been hanging out with the glitterati of the Who world, so perhaps some of that's worn off.
I'm worn out, that's all it is. I'll perk myself up.
Yeah. It must be buoyed up by that little, how should we describe it, a moment in the spotlight of Doctor Who wonderfulness, or at least Big Finish.
Yes, we had a great good do. We really did, celebrating 20 years. Some of us were celebrating 20 years, some of us were celebrating lesser periods of time. And a jolly good time was had by all. Even Mr. Moffat was there, and I don't think he's ever written for Big Finish, so... these freeloaders get everywhere.
I was going to say, yes. Yeah.
It's about time he got his pen out, really. Mind you, that would reduce the opportunities for everyone else, so maybe not. Giles, anything... obviously, Paul said it's a very high bar there, but anything you want to tell us about in the last month or so since we got together?
Not terribly, no. I've just been off on travels a little bit and having a much-needed break. And yes, I'm sorry I couldn't make it from... I think you recorded the Terrance Dicks tribute when I was otherwise unavailable due to either holiday or impending deadline. And I was sorry not to be able to take part in that, but it was a very nice little thing you put together there. Dear old Tezza. He'll be sadly missed, but I'm not sure I can really add much more to what you guys said with regard to his deep influence in terms of the books, more than anything. Yes, without him, I probably wouldn't be doing what I do today. God help me. Not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
We'll count that as a good thing.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Very good. And I think I've had a holiday in between podcasts 4 and 4.5, but I've been back at work for weeks now, so I can barely remember it.
Ah.
Okay, well, I think the moment we can keep putting it off if we like, but it's pretty pointless. So I think we're going to have to launch into the Horns of Nimon and what we made of it. I mean, I suppose the first thing I wanted to say is I'm not quite sure how I missed it first time round.
That was going to be my first question. So had you seen the rest of the series?
So I'm pretty sure that I saw some of Destiny of the Daleks, although I may not have seen all of it. I definitely saw City of Death. I remember seeing that very clearly. I think I saw it twice because I'm sure it was repeated.
There were repeats of Destiny and City, I think.
Yeah. And then I have absolutely no memory of Creature from the Pit or Nightmare of Eden or Horns of Nimon. So I'm pretty sure I didn't see any of them. But
have we been through this before? Were you one of the legions of serious-minded fans of a certain age who abandoned it because it was getting too silly?
Well, the sort of age that I was 11, so I'm not sure that I was old enough for that. I just started at secondary school, and I just started reading Doctor Who magazine as well, that Doctor Who Weekly as it was then. So it's not as if I wasn't, enthusiastic about Doctor Who still. And I can't honestly think I had anything better to do on a Saturday afternoon.
Space 1999?
No, it definitely wasn't that. So I find it unaccountable, but there we go. So I thought it was important that I should correct that error 40 years on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, I have seen Nightmare of Eden in the interim, and I quite liked that. I've never quite caught up with Creature from the Pit yet.
Yeah.
While we're just randomly reminiscing, Nightmare of Eden is one of the tiny handful of stories I haven't seen since the original broadcast.
Right.
I'm not saving it for a special occasion, but looking forward to that.
I thought it was quite good. I mean, it's not brilliant by any means, but the concept is rather good. And okay, I think some of the characters seem to be in a different production from the rest, but that apart, and the effects are the effects. But all in all, I think it's not bad. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that.
No. Giles, did you watch Horns of Nimon first time round?
I don't really remember it. My recollection of season 17 is the only two stories I can remember watching are Destiny and City of Death, which I suspect might well have been on the repeats. And the others are kind of, they're etched into my mind because of those photographic covers of the early issues of Doctor Who Weekly with Mandrels on the rampage and
lovely
and
Mandrel.
so on and so forth. But for some reason, I don't have any strong memories of these particular ones, those particular episodes. I think I might have caught a bit of Creature from the Pit at the time.
I have very strong memories of all of season 17. It's why I'm constantly defending it. It caught. I think I was exactly the right age for it, and everything from the nice big posters in Doctor Who Weekly made the whole year seem rather special to me. I do remember Horns of Nimon. I'm just checking the broadcast dates. I thought one episode was New Year's Eve, but it's not exactly. It's sort of between Christmas and New Year's.
It was a Christmas sort of.
I was round my nan's house for one of them, and I remember that because it was always awkward watching Doctor Who at somebody else's house, a house where they were less sympathetic to the programme and to me, perhaps any combination thereof. But happy days.
Don't tell me they actually talked while it was on.
I can't remember it that well. It was probably more sort of tutting and what's this rubbish and why is he still watching this? He's 8. Shouldn't he have moved on by now? That sort of thing. So how are we starting? I mean, is it fair to start with you, Richard, as you watched this for the first time at a relatively advanced age?
Yeah. So I think, like with many stories, I think it has a reasonably good start to it, and it's quite an interesting concept. And for once the wobbly sets are supposed to be wobbly because it's an old spaceship. I guess I got a whiff of Seeds of Death out of it. It felt it was a bit at the fag end of a season and everyone was a bit tired and they didn't quite have the same enthusiasm for it they might have had back in May or June when they were recording the first one. And it's a bit uneven, but I mean it isn't awful. I mean, for many years it was classed as being the absolute worst that Doctor Who had ever been by certain fans, and I certainly don't think it's that. One of the thoughts I had was that I'd stumbled onto the pilot episode of a program called Romana, where she travels around the universe with her companion, the Doctor, sorting out problems. It seemed to be very Lalla Ward centric.
That might be one of the things I like about it. It's possibly one of the last really good outings for Romana. I have to go back to stories like this to remind me why I like Romana 2 so much, because recently, for a different project, I was watching a lot of season 18, and Romana is not much fun there, and the way she's written the following year doesn't bring out the best in Lala's performance. But here, I think she's sparkling. And yeah, I mean, all the way from Destiny through to here, she is, in various different ways, an equal of the Doctor, sometimes even supplanting him. She nicks his costume in Destiny of the Daleks, and here, as you say, she's possibly, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much this comes from Tom's performance and how much was inspired by the writing, but Tom is at his silliest here, and whether obviously that doesn't have any connection to the writing of Romana as the more capable of the two, but there's definitely a connection in the mind of the viewer.
Yeah.
She almost seems like his carer at times.
Yeah, I think Tom is silly because he's got nothing to do. I think he gets a bit bored, and so inevitably, because he's got so little to do, he's forced to do a bit of mugging to camera and a bit of silly business, because what else is he going to do? Other than that, he just has to shout "got it" several times.
It's a fair point. I think his worst scenes in this story, and thus the worst scenes in this story, and thus, for me, the worst scenes in the whole of Series 17 are the ones where he's stuck on his own in the TARDIS in episode 2. And he's clearly being indulged by the director. Maybe Graham Williams has wandered off inadvisedly. And somehow we end up with the silliness being turned up from something that would amuse, from whimsicality that would amuse children, into breaking the fourth wall kind of silliness, which is when even I have to take a step back and say, hang on, should we really be using Goon Show sound effects and magicking rosettes out of thin air? I mean, and as you say, it's probably just because he felt a need to liven up these rather tedious scenes where he was stuck.
Yeah. I mean, oddly, this director you're talking about, Kenny McBain of Inspector Morse fame.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not that he doesn't know what he's doing.
Well, I had to. Well, you say that. I did do him the service of checking his CV, because I wasn't going to say anything, because I had some criticisms to advance. He appears to have had a much better career later on as a producer than as a director. And he'd done very little directing before this, and not all that much afterwards of any note. A lot of soap operas, and not a lot. A lot of what he did was soap operas, but that wasn't very much. So yes, I don't know what was going on here. As you say, it's always been a temptation to look at the story as the end of season 17, and the idea that some things are ramped up or ramped down. You're suggesting that people were tired at the end of the series. I'm wondering if perhaps giving Tom leeway to inject bits of business was progressing story by story. But of course, you mustn't forget that it wasn't actually the end. It was supposed to be Sharda after this.
Yes, exactly.
And, which we can tell from what was made doesn't seem to exhibit a progression of this tiredness or silliness. So it's not quite as simple as that.
No. But then, of course, I mean, Seeds of Death begat, via Space Pirates, the war game. So I mean, it may be more a kind of mid to late season lull rather than the absolute end of the line.
Well, I've seen it mentioned in reviews where people have said, if Sharda had aired, then Nimon would be seen in possibly more of the spirit that it was intended as, being a little bit of a late season, like Christmas panto sort of enterprise, which is, I don't think it's, I don't know, I wouldn't say it carries it off perfectly on that score, but unlike, for instance, the only other time I can remember Who really airing at Christmas was Greatest Show, and that of course was accidental, or I don't think would have been known when they were planning season 25, and yet Greatest Show is perfect as a Christmas special, Doctor Who really, or seasonal kind of thing from that point of view. And I remember it being on at that time of year and loving the fact they were airing something that was quite that, an ersatz Christmas special. But it's it's a curate's egg, this story, isn't it? It really is. But it's funny because there's some things that are well executed, but I kind of feel like there's a breakdown of. It does feel like people were trying to get different things out of the script, and the director, by the end of the production, was generally not succeeding in getting everything firing in the same direction. So different bits go wandering off in different directions. When you mentioned the shaky sets earlier, by the way, Richard, I meant to make a note of that actually, because I thought, well, that's, and the special effects of the outside of the ship are sadly hampered by the fact they're on video rather than a couple of seasons earlier we'd have had nice film. We'd have had nice film work from the Ian Scoons kind of school of all the stuff that they had in Invisible Enemy and so on, which lifts it. But I did think, okay, well, they've got a little bit of effort. It was quite nice actually seeing the bit where they crash the ship or smash up the ship at any rate, and the fact they had actually designs. They aren't just reduced to doing the standard Captain Kirk style. Everybody roll from side to side of the studio while they shake the camera around. They'd actually built a set that involved some kind of framework that was actually able to judder around and shake things up properly. And I thought, that's
definite plus point.
Yeah, it's going a little bit above and beyond what you'd necessarily expect.
There was a moment where there's a line of dialogue where he's saying, "Oh, we're heading straight for the ship." I think in the TARDIS, but unfortunately the model shot, they're veering off in a funny direction. I mean,
you know what? I didn't have any problems with the model shots, and until you just said that, Giles, I hadn't noticed that they were on videotape. And by which I mean, obviously now you say it, I realise that they are, but I didn't notice it in the sense of, oh, that's a shame. That looks a bit crap compared to what we're used to. Yeah, I don't know. I assume there's a reason they did it on videotape, possibly because there were some shots with so many elements that were superimposed one on another, such as when the TARDIS and various asteroids and bits of junk had all. Oh, and the use of the they needed to superimpose that force field tunnel effect.
Yeah, true.
I thought it all looked fine, and
maybe that's the root cause of it.
Plenty of worse effects before and after in the 80s.
I liked the explosion at the end. I thought that was
well, that was on film, and of course, thinking about it, I'm probably not being entirely fair because, of course, earlier in that season, it's the same season, and you've got City of Death, which obviously has great model work.
Yeah.
So it was probably not so much a sign of budget cuts as it was, the limitations of or something being driven by the fact they needed to put video effects over it afterwards.
Thing is, I like this one. I've always defended it. I won't say I staunchly defend it. No, I do staunchly defend it. I don't staunchly defend it because I think it's a piece of genius. I staunchly defend it because I think that the disparity between its atrocious reputation and the reality is far too great. If you look beyond, I don't think the production's that bad, but if you can look behind that, I think it's a very solid and ingenious Doctor Who story, which I think is true of every script in season 17, which is why, and also I'd say the previous year, Anthony Reid as a script editor and Douglas Adams as a script editor, both I think presided over stories that were very imaginative compared to a lot of the Who we'd had for the previous decade or so, and also very competent narratively. Just good, solid storytelling.
Yeah.
I think the reason this one in particular gets the flack is because of those handful of moments when, for whatever reason, it goes too far. And none of that is in the script. And I was only really watching it this time that I was reminded that it's actually got less comedy in it than some of the other scripts that year. It's fairly straight.
Yeah.
More like possibly one of the scripts that Anthony Reid was responsible for the previous year. It's got quite a lot of funny lines, quite a lot of witty dialogue.
Yeah, and some of those lines seem to be straight out of the Hitchhiker's Guide as well. There's the line where he says,
"Weakling scum."
Why don't you give me the gun and then I can keep an eye on myself so I don't get up to any funny business? And then, here, as you rightly say, we are. Both of them from that scene with Arthur Dent in the mud. So, I mean, I can't be sure, but it just feel like Douglas Adams is peppering it up with a bit of comedy after the event.
The other thing he might have peppered up, I think, is the science. There are a couple of quite nice scientific concepts in this, which there isn't really much of in season 16. So I think that's almost certainly down to Douglas Adams. Which, and I'm sorry to go on about this again, but I'm just going to boil down my obsession with science in season 17 and 18 one more time, just in case anybody who's been exposed to me on a podcast recently hasn't picked up on it yet. Because I seem to have spent the last few months talking about this. We started with Christopher Hamilton Bidmead on Frontios, do you remember, on our last edition?
Yeah. Indeed,
and
yes.
I started rabbiting on about his obsession with how he brought science back into Doctor Who and how it really isn't as simple as that, because it hadn't, not only had it not gone away, but it was flourishing. It was in good health before he took over. He just, for some reason, hadn't noticed. And then I did a rival podcast where I spent ages talking about season 18 and made exactly the same point again. But really, I mean, what have we got here? There's the Nimon's creating a black hole.
Yeah.
In orbit over the planet as a hyperspace wormhole.
Yes.
To allow them to, which is nice. That's a nice scientific idea. Giles, you can explain whether that makes any sense or not. I mean,
yes. Well, yeah. Sorry.
It's also good narratively because it's a mystery. This story is structured as a series of mysteries that take us from one place to another. Another detail, which is not intrinsic to the story, and I think it's possible was added by Douglas, is the idea that the Doctor suddenly notices that from above the maze, the labyrinth, looks like a circuit board. And they've added in the explanation that might be why the walls keep changing, because they are logic gates opening and closing in a... Again, Giles, can you explain? That's not. He doesn't use the expression logic gates. If it had been the next year under CHB, they almost certainly would have done.
Yes,
but he uses another expression for which type of printed circuit board does he say? Oh, I can't remember.
Oh Lord, sorry.
Did you pick up on that? Anyway,
I didn't pick up on that one.
It's a nice little detail, but
I watched the featurette on the DVD, and Anthony Reid said that he had that idea of the printed circuit board.
Excellent, good. I'm glad it was him and not Douglas, because that means he's an even better, more rounded writer than I thought. What's odd about that? Do you know what? I'm going to come back to it. I can't tell you what's odd about that that whole subplot, because it links into to the God complex as well. So I'll park that. But anyway, I think it's a jolly, entertaining story. It progresses through the 4 episodes in a way that I like my stories to do, in the sense that there's continual progression of the narrative, so it doesn't just set up its stall in episode 1 and then run around for the next 3. What was I saying about the comedy? I think the main difference between this and possibly Creature of the Pit, Nightmare of Eden, there aren't any funny characters in this. So Graham Crowden has chosen to introduce some comedy to liven things up a bit for himself.
Yeah.
And again, that sort of acting isn't to everyone's taste, is it? But I laughed and laughed and laughed at his performance, and it didn't undercut the point of the character to me. It just added to it. He wasn't fighting against the character as written.
No.
I think it just, I can fully understand that some people don't want to see that in Doctor Who. But when he yells, "My dreams of conquest," it's just sublime. It is pantomime, but in the best way.
If you're going to hire Graham Crowden to do a role like that, that's what you're going to get.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I think, I could watch him for hours. Yeah.
His second in command plays it perfectly straight, which balances it out.
Yeah.
It's strange. I'm not blind to the production flaws. There are all of the extras uniformly are absolutely terrible. That again is a flaw that people seem to have picked up on in a lot of season 17. I remember Destiny of the Daleks gets it in the neck for the extras being particularly appalling in the background. But this lot are very peculiar, I don't know.
Yes.
But I don't know. They all look rather past it, but perhaps that's deliberate, because just to emphasise the fact that Scon on Empire
is in
decline.
I made a note to that effect that I think this idea of them being a bunch of old farts with dreams that they'll, and they're always banging on about the Second Scotland Empire.
Stroke Second World War.
Yes, I said, I've got a note here that the Scotland High Council come over like a Question Time audience.
Yes,
in the brief bits that we see them.
With the higher quality of supporting artiste acting and more time and sympathetic direction, that could have come across quite strongly and seemed satirical. But as it is, we have to read that into it. But I think it's there. I think it's there in the script.
Yeah,
no, there are parallels, oddly enough, for something written 40 years ago with our present day situation. Well, people looking back at the past glories. Anyway, sorry, go on.
I think you're quite right, Richard. And I think my only issue with the script as such will be based on the fact that it does leave the Doctor, lounging around the TARDIS or hanging around the TARDIS for far too long, and then doesn't really find all that much for him to do. As you say, it's the Romana show. It's not a bad thing in itself because Romana's very engaging, but it's a shame they didn't find a more rewarding subplot for the Doctor, like post crash. It seems. Yes, it just feels a bit. I don't know. Maybe it gets my back up because I'm no fan of the Sayward era for its incredibly lengthy TARDIS scenes and anything like that. I tend to balk against and just think, get them out of the TARDIS and can we get on with the adventure? But yeah, that's really my only issue with the plot or with the script as such. But I do think there are things where they sort of fail, and you can see what the script is going for. And then yes, it does slightly get lost in the mix. They somewhere along the line lose the impetus because the director maybe hasn't got a firm enough hand on the tiller, or it's just other production related issues. So, for instance, that thing with the I think it's rather a great idea that the society of bickering senile old men, or rather ineffective and prissy, and the stuff with the two pilots at the start. I think the thing is, I think Malcolm Terrace, of which we get quite a lot, and it's great.
More than we'd like to see.
Well, and I think the Weakling Scum gag is great, but I kind of think it doesn't quite bring out the idea that here's an old guy trying to look butch and tough quite as much as maybe it could, and the fact that he causes the entire plot by virtue of his wanting to take the shortcut in the first place in those opening scenes is slightly then not. I don't know. I just think there's something about the tone of the performance that doesn't quite bring it out and make you realise quite what a ridiculous man this is.
He's not very good, is he? But I mean, but it's a nice idea that these are not Terry Nation style competent space captains. They're. It's more like the Warriors Gate the following year with bickering, irritable. Yes, it's somewhere between the two, isn't it? These people clearly still are hanging on to some sense of honour and duty, and
again we're pointing out that 17 and 18 have far more in common than they do in differences. Really,
it's just fundamentally the characters are mostly people. They're very human in a Williams era. I find. And that's the main thing you lose the following year. You end up with stories like Meglos, where they're nothing other than just names on a page.
Yes.
And I would always rather have characters that feel like two-dimensional people, played by shouting Malcolm Terrace, is still better than one-dimensional.
Yes. But I think that thing about the sort of the society on Skonos is somewhat. Again, it slightly misses the mark. The way they cast the younger soldiers on Skonos, there's maybe not quite the development there, or so maybe that's a slight failure in the script or something that was cut. That it would be nice to have the idea that old Sorak is the younger commander, isn't he? And he's really the only one of the younger Skonan characters that gets a speaking part. And not that many people on Skonos get speaking parts. I kind of think that idea about whether you've got the old men and then the dreaming of the second Skonan Empire and then the Callow youth, but they haven't actually done anything.
Yeah,
really,
that's more like the sort of Armageddon factor of setup, isn't it? I think, isn't that?
Yeah, well, I guess that would make sense.
It also reminded me of the Space Museum. all those years ago.
Oh,
sort of
yes,
a
yes.
militaristic empire that's fallen on lean times.
Oh, yes, yeah. Yes, I love that. Welcome to, what's the planet? I can't remember the planet.
Zeros.
Zeros. A planet
With an
in
X.
the... And who are the Moroks? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the way the guy proudly announces, "Welcome to Zeros, a planet in the Morok Empire." It's like, welcome to, it's like company branding. It's
But I like the fact that, as I said, it's an unfolding mystery, and we're ahead. We know more than Soldeed knows more than everyone else on his planet. But he certainly doesn't know everything.
No.
Because the Nimon are one step ahead of him.
Yes.
And we're ahead of him because we know some of what the Nimon are up to, but not all of it. The truth that is some way ahead of us as well. So it's working on, the plot is advancing on several different levels.
Yeah.
And the few characters within it all have nice, complicated interwebs of relationship. So I find it thoroughly entertaining. I would be happy to put this on for an afternoon of non-challenging Doctor Who. It's just going to make me laugh.
Well, what I like about it is that it's clearly struck a note with Toby Whithouse for later on, for our discussion, because it's not just the fact that the central character has a sort of bull-like appearance. There's a whole raft of things between the two stories. So the issue of faith, I mean, that's very important in the God complex, but it's also very important in this one as well. The faith of the sacrifices that them coming to the planet and giving themselves up is for the greater good. The faith of, what's the name of the female character?
Tika?
Tika.
Tika. Yeah.
Yes.
So Tika's faith in Seth as well, which is misplaced and yet isn't. Is an interesting feature. And of course, the pretend faith that Soldeed has in the Nimon, that he's sort of projecting onto the rest of the populace, and yet there's also the sort of faith that Soldeed has in his own ability to be one step ahead of the Nimon that's completely misplaced.
It's
that falls apart. So yeah, it's interesting that
it's mentioned early on that Soldeed is the only scientist left on the planet. Isn't it?
That's true.
Which I think sets up, with hindsight, the fact that although he pretends to worship the Nimon as a god, like the rest of the populace, it's not entirely clear. Yeah, he seems to have a complex relationship. He knows enough about science that he should be able to see what he should be wondering why this god is manifesting his powers through instruments of scientific progress rather than just conjuring up miracles out of thin air. You think that would ring alarm bells for him?
Well, he does. At one point, he says the Nimon is as a god to us. I don't think he.
Yeah,
I don't think he thinks
no,
they
I think he
are
does know.
gods.
But as you say, interesting link. Interesting link considering, and I'll file this away for the section where we talk about the myths that underpin both stories, but the Minotaur of Greek myth wasn't a god. Nobody worshipped it. So that's an interesting element which is unique to both Horns and Nimon and God complex. So that is something we can discuss under whether or not the links, the Nimon references in God complex were there in Toby Whithouse's mind from the start, or just something that was added, as I originally thought when I first saw it all these years ago, as just a one-liner.
I'm certain it isn't. I mean, I think that the God complex is built absolutely on top of what's in this story. I mean, perhaps to some extent unconsciously, but nonetheless, that there are so many links between the two that I can't see it as being coincidental.
Yeah. No, I think that now, having just watched them back to back. At the time, I thought it was one of that small subset of New Who stories where somebody had spotted a potential link with a classic story and put in a one-liner just to amuse the fans, which the most extreme example is, let's pretend it's been pointed out that the Ood look a bit like Sensorites, so let's put in a reference to them being from neighbouring planets, but there are other examples of those tenuous little nods. And I thought this was that, and now I don't think it was. Have we moved on?
I'm not sure. I was going to say yes. I was going to somewhat critique the Anethans. Unfortunately, that was going to be another of my points where I was going to say I think things rather fail to really play up, what's in the script, and I think there's more again, there could be more comedy to be wrought from the idea of the relationship between Seth and Tika, and the hero worship, and his, and the fact he's not really what he. It feels like it's somewhat underplayed compared to what you could get out of it.
A bit like Paradise Towers as well, there, isn't it? That
yes,
that side of, which again doesn't entirely work the way the author probably.
Yeah, but then again, old what's his name playing Pex. At least he knows. He knows how to.
No,
he knows what the part calls. He knows what the part calls for in some. Although I suppose it's not quite the same.
I think
thing,
Janet Ellis is doing better here than what's his name? Simon
Gibbs Kent. Yes.
Gibbs Kent.
Yeah.
Well, let's blame him.
Who had a very seems to have had a rather sad life. Apparently, he was very prolific to other people and all sorts of things, and then died at the age of 28 from morphine poisoning. So. Presumably suicide. I think there's a misadventure caused by morphine poisoning, but rather sad. And he was into To Serve Them All My Days, amongst others.
Oh yeah.
So yes, he popped up in all sorts of things through the 70s and 80s. But yes, I do think Janet Ellis gets the best. I think she gets it more than he does, or, without a firm directorial hand there.
It's very analog technology on display. It's all kind of dials and meters and the sort of thing that was electronics in the 70s, but very quickly stopped. These days, if you were doing printed circuit boards and computers, it would all be digital technology. But you can see that for the 70s, it was clearly all about that kind of.
If we're still talking about the visual sign, actually, it's not a worthy observation to go out on. But I think it looks quite good. The direction is incredibly inconsistent. There are sometimes he just appears to be pointing the camera and waving it from side to side to follow the actors. And at other times, when he's in there with them, there are some quite good stuff, some use of low angles and some handheld camera work, which, again, oddly, remind me of Destiny of the Daleks. Another story which, at the time, got a lot of criticism for its direction, but if you step back and look at it now, there's some interesting things going on. He's I wouldn't say he's doing his best, Kenny McBain, but I've seen worse. I've seen blander direction. It's just inconsistent.
Yes, also on...
And it's got a lot of atmosphere. It's not overlit. Think of all those stories in the following decade that were where overlighting appeared with the default, and we hear stories about how directors had to fight to get the lights turned down. Well, that didn't appear to be a problem here.
True.
And I like that. Yeah, everything looks a bit seedy and decayed, even before we get to Krinoff. And the sets are simple, but they're enough to conjure up the atmosphere, and that's what we need.
I like also on visuals. I had two other points here that I made my notes about. One of which is serious and one of which is completely off the wall. But the Nimon themselves, I rather like the design. I think they're a good, and they are a weird design, but they're I think they're very effective. I just think the movement completely throws them. But when they're standing still, and they, weirdly enough, they remind me a bit of the monsters from Quatermass in the Pit, the aliens. They've sort of got something somewhat insectoid about them, as well as the bull side of things, whether it's the big red eyes or something like that. But
is it based on Minoan drawings or something like that?
If either of you have done any research, can you answer this for me? There was a myth going around, which may be true, that they were supposed to remove those bull-like heads, and they were just helmets, and they had a different.
Oh, good lord!
Some sort of different look underneath, but in the end, the budget didn't stretch to 2 sets of heads. And that's why they look a bit static and mask-like, because that's what they were supposed to be. But whether that's just something a fan invented after the fact, I don't know.
I was thinking that if it had been in the RTD era, they'd have been, they'd have proper cow heads, wouldn't they? Like the the rhinoceroses or whatever else. Whereas this is much more stylized. But I mean, why would they look exactly like a bull? I mean, that's taking things perhaps a bit too far. So they're just sort of bull-like. What was your other one?
My final point on this was just going to be, And I was I was completely gobsmacked by it because I hadn't watched it for ages, and I thought, hang on. And clearly, the Pet Shop Boys worked with a costume designer who is a fan of the Horns of Nimon. Because if you look at some of the stuff that Chris Lowe has worn and that they wore on their Pandemonium and Electric tours, there are larger, virtually every element of Commander Sorak's outfit has appeared at one time or another on Chris Lowe's upper body.
They didn't actually hire June Hudson at any point, though, did they?
Was this June Hudson gig?
It was, yeah.
Ah, really?
Which is another one of those weird similarities between season 17 and 18. They're supposed to look so completely different, but she does the majority of the costumes in both series, I think. And, you've got to love her. She's the most extraordinary flamboyant costume designer. Suits Blake Seven very well. With Doctor Who, for me, it's always hit and miss whether designs are in sympathy with the story. And I think it's a bit over the top here. And another one of those elements where I think people take a very superficial look at it and think that's silly. Stop this, it's getting silly. And it's just... I notice Sorak starts taking his hat off as the story goes on, which reminds me of Colin Baker in Arc of Infinity. At some point decided it's ridiculous, I can't act under this thing.
But they are splendid costumes, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. But yeah, you have a look. The feathery hats and the big bulky upper body jackets. Though I think the Pet Shop Boys one was made of straws at some point.
I mean, they're going for, I guess, the costumes as...
Same silhouette, though.
Exhibiting all the pomp that the society itself is lacking. People are just trying to...
Machismo, yeah. It's, I think she was quite canny about what she was reading into it. Clearly read the script. Well, obviously, but, paid attention to it.
Yeah, the other thing I like from the last episode is that the Nimons are very, very slow in their pursuit of the people escaping, but fortunately, so is K9. So actually, both parties move equally slowly, allowing them to be caught in the end. I suppose that's a flaw, but somehow it's quite nice that it matches up. I also said when K9 came up on the scene at the end, oh look, it's Canis Ex Machina. I don't know whether that's a thing.
No,
it just felt like
it's very good. It will be. I'm going to write that down. Hang on.
It will be now. Yes.
Well, I'm going to pitch that as a. No, I shouldn't say these things on record, should I? There goes my plausible deniability.
I'd say it's far too good a line for this podcast. So use it with my blessing.
Thank you. My last few Big Finish stories have had the most extraordinary puns in the titles. So that would, if I get a reputation for that sort of thing, I'm going to need help with them because I'm running out of puns.
Yeah. There's a nice section in this as well with Krynoth. It's very much like the parallel Earth in Inferno. You get a chance to see this is what it's like down the line. This is where it's going to end. There's not a lot of effort put into it, but you do get a sense of this is where they're headed. I thought that was quite a nice touch.
Think about the small cast with only 2 speaking parts on what's it called again?
Not Skonos.
On Skonos and 1 on Krynoth. I think Anthony Reid must be being extremely disciplined as a former script editor in not unlike so many other script editors who, once they'd left the program, seem to completely forget all the rules and start writing things that couldn't possibly be made. But he is being very generous to Douglas and to give him something which doesn't test the BBC's capabilities. And even then, they fell short.
Two speaking Anethans.
He must have thought, I made this as simple as possible, and you still couldn't quite stretch to reach it. Thanks very much.
There's a lovely nod as well to the kind of lack of budget when Tom Baker says, there's going to be millions of them coming. And I think it's Janet Ellis comes out with a line of, 2 at a time?
I like that, because that is the sort of thing we think in every other story, and you've only got 2 schools of writers. The ones who think, well, let's not draw attention to that. I can't think of a plausible explanation for this, so let's not draw attention to it. And then my preference is where you take the time to explain it away, and then you
hang a
audience
lampshade on it.
think that they they think that you respect them, the audience, if you go to that trouble.
Yeah, there's a brilliant go back to your constituencies and prepare for government moment from Soldeed as well when he's talking to the sort of half dozen people in the council chamber. Then the Nimon's going to sort everything out and everything's going to be wonderful.
My favourite bit of bad extra acting is where, who is it? Is it Sorek who rushes in and says, "What's going on?" And to a man, they all ad-lib, "We don't know," almost in unison. I mean, so obviously the director suggested, "Why don't you?" They said, "Should we do anything, Kenny?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. Maybe one or two of you could say we don't know, that sort of thing." And they
Rhubarb.
They take it marvellously literally. Right, let's move on. We can't possibly top that observation.
Yeah.
That sums it up. My dreams of conquest.
So yeah, so from that to the God Complex by Toby Whithouse, which I think is a bit forgotten. I would say in the history of Doctor Who. I mean, I'm not saying that everyone has forgotten about it, but I don't hear it discussed very often. It seems to be maybe overlooked in that kind of crazy Series 6 when everything was going on and there were sort of mad schemes, and it's not quite completely divorced from that storyline. There's a little bit at the end that sort of ties it in, but it's not really in the thick of it all.
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? Fans have this tendency to divide episodes into important ones that have something bearing on the structure or the ongoing plot, and filler. Everything's just filler. Drives me mad. I mean, most of the best stories would count as filler in that sense.
Yeah.
Good. But I mean, for me, if I was forced to try and do that, and things like, I don't know, the Curse of the Black Pearl is pure filler for me, whereas the God Complex is about something. And for me, it always stood out. I personally have never forgotten it, and not only because I'm a massive Nimon fan. Me and Toby, we're the founder members of the Horns of Nimon fan club.
Well, I guess it does stand in the middle of, or towards the end of, one of the most densely arc-driven series of new Who, doesn't it? Really, I think people, unfortunately, but yes, I know. I find I'm no great fan of season 6, series 6. But I find the more standalone stories, I generally find more tolerable there than, and some of them are very good, in fact. So.
Well, I'm going to nail my colours to the mast. I mean, I have to say that I always thought that my favourite new series writer was Stephen Moffat after his very strong start. But I don't know. I'm thinking maybe it is Toby Whithouse. I mean, this one in particular, I think, is an absolute tour de force. There's maybe 2 or 3 ideas, but they're very well thought out, and the whole thing together is an extraordinarily unsettling story. A story about the power and the danger of faith, although to some extent also it's both good and bad in the story. It's nicely nuanced, and it's the Doctor Who meets The Shining. It's a wonderfully incongruous set in that hotel, and yet it's got some high science fiction concepts. I think it within what's less than 45 minutes by the time that you've tagged on that Moffat-y bit on the end. There's a huge amount that's in there packed into that sort of fairly small amount of screen time.
The fact that it's taking its visual cues from The Shining seems so obvious that I don't know why they didn't actually reference it, because Doctor Who nowadays is metatextual enough to get away with it, but perhaps they thought that would be going too far, and it was actually just a production decision that would be undercut if the characters commented on it. Because it is trying to get the same unnerving effect as The Shining, isn't it? So I guess that would, to hang a lampshade on that, as Giles would say, would probably spoil the effect. But no, it's a reach to suggest that faith plays any serious part in Horns and Nimon, but here I think it's the best exploration of that topic we've had in New Who, and one of the best in the entire run. It reminds one of Curse of Femric. That's one of the other stories that comes close, isn't it? And they have the same gimmick at the end, where the Doctor has to force his companion to lose their faith in him.
Mm.
But it takes a gentler approach this time.
Yes.
I mean, it's perhaps a nice companion piece with Gridlock, which we talked about a few months ago, which looks at a different side of faith.
It does. Yes. Sadly, I don't have any. I must confess. This is, I think, probably the first time I've rewatched it since airing. So although I've come away with a favourable impression, I haven't really developed any huge overarching rants or theories about it.
It pulls off the sort of, I don't know, I was going to say bait and switch, but that's very unfair, that a lot of new Who stories do, in that they start off selling you one idea and switch to something else en route, because it's it's directed like a proper horror film right from the off, and keeps up that atmosphere, but then at the end pulls the rug out from under you and goes for that other new Who favourite. The monster isn't evil, it's just misunderstood. but again, some of those ideas, I tend to roll my eyes when I see them coming, because they're often done quite badly. But here, Toby is a very skillful writer and pulls that off.
I mean, it's a tremendous, for me, a tremendous start. I mean, it's not as long as some of the pre-title sequences, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but you've got this kind of fabulously weird opening with the policewoman and the going into the rooms with the quite disturbing visuals, and then the arrival of the monster, nicely kept off camera, really. So you just get sort of aspects of it rather than the whole thing. Yeah, it's really rather splendid.
The direction is absolutely terrific.
Yes,
Completely in sympathy with the writing and taking it to another level. I mean, I don't have to... Again, I was having to stretch to say nice things about what Kenny McBain achieved. Now, what's the name of the director on this?
This was Nick Owen, and he just come off the back. He did quite a lot of series 6 and 7, but he just come off the back of doing the Prisoner reboot.
Right.
Funnily enough, which also was quite good from the, had that kind of trippy visuals. I remember quite enjoying that at the time. He directed the whole lot of that, and visually that was all quite striking as well.
He throws all sorts of tricks in here. It doesn't just pick one nice trippy effect and stick with it. We get it's one of my favourite. The camera work around the ventriloquist doll scene. I've just realised it reminds me a bit of Sleuth. Do you remember Sleuth, the Laurence Olivier Michael Caine film?
Yes.
There's a lot of unnerving, slightly askew, Dutch-angled shots of dolls in that, which I guess is an obvious way to film them, but only obvious once a particular genius has thought of it.
Oh, there you go. He went on to direct The Day of the Doctor, amongst others.
Oh, well, there you go.
And he did a couple of the better Sherlocks, I think, in terms of he did the...
Right.
There's one particular...
He did The Line Detective.
There's one particular trick that he uses a lot, which I can't even tell whether it would have been completely invented by the director or if it was hinted at in the script, and if so, I can't think how. But when the characters first come under the influence, or when the influence of the creature is starting to ramp up, and you get fast cuts between them smiling and looking normal, and you know what I mean?
Yes.
Very fast montage of different clips of faces and different expressions, which is quite unnerving, but also sells you what's happening inside these people's heads at that point. And I can't imagine how that might have been suggested in the script. So if the director brought that in, then well done.
Yes, as you say, it is directed like a horror movie. Yeah, it's got that sensibility throughout. I'm no great fan of horror, but you can spot the tropes and the flourishes, and it does create that very unsettling effect.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so people talk about Doctor Who being scary, and, clearly it can be scary for children. I mean, for me, this is the closest it's ever going to get to being scary as an adult. Now, I mean, I'm not going to say it's scary second or third time of watching when you know what's going on, but I recall watching this the first time and finding, I suppose, not deeply frightening, but sort of scary, unsettling. What's going to happen next? Is there something behind me? Kind of that it played in that kind of space, and so I think, probably as close as it's going to get. Some of the other ones that have been described as being really scary, I've kind of thought, not really for me. But this one did hit. There's I'm sure it's not intended parallel, but there's a parallel image I thought of Joe's in the chair with the tape across his mouth. It's a bit like John Pertwee in the Spearhead from Space thing, where he's whizzing in the wheelchair and he's being abducted from the hospital.
Yes,
it's nice. I think also nice the way that each of the characters goes through the same arc, but they're kind of intercut, and you don't necessarily pick it up initially. But so one of them's going into their room while another one's going through the praise hymn bit, and then they hit it, and then someone else is finding their and you can. It's very nicely paced so that there's always something about to happen, which you can spot going back through it. But the first time through, the mystery unravels in a nice way.
yes, yeah, and it gradually, each one kind of takes things forward. Each time someone goes through the process, it kind of takes things forward in the plot to us understanding a bit more about what's going on.
And a nice reveal that the Doctor has actually been giving people completely the wrong advice.
Yes.
Is that mostly there to lead into him deciding that Amy and Rory might be better off without him at the end?
Well, that appears to be why he's dropping them off. That A, they've had too many brushes with death, but B, he's lost faith in himself in a way. So that's another interesting question of faith. But it does appear that until up to this point he's absolutely confident that he's going to get them back safe, and now he isn't anymore.
But on the other hand, if you look at the context of the overall season, that was building towards what's happened or already happened at Lake Silencio, where the Doctor has seen that he's apparently died on his own, and so there's a certain amount of. It rather spoils it by the fact that the Doctor then appears to go on a 900-year bender or something like that, doesn't he? Isn't there some throwaway line? It's in the next episode he goes and sees Craig again, and then goes before he goes to Lake Silencio, and he seems to spend a lot of time faffing around, which obviously we know because it's a program about time travel is kind of plausible, but it's I guess he knows he needs to drop the characters off, and I really like that, and in some ways it's something of a shame that wasn't the real goodbye to Amy and Rory, because it would be the quite nice and refreshing way to actually bring an end to a companion story within the new series, instead of everyone having to be torn from the Doctor's side, kicking and screaming, one way or another, because they all have to be like the best ever. And it was quite nice to just think, okay, go and get on with your lives. And I don't want to take responsibility for getting you killed, or nearly getting you killed every week, or getting Rory killed every week, frankly.
Yes, well, there is something of that too. Yes, it's Rory and Autumn.
And of course, that's also played into, I think, the other thing from the Doctor's point of view is because of the Rita business, because Rita is another great example of a companion that could have been. Yeah. And really good character, good actress, and so on, and the fact that the fact that he doesn't save her, I think that obviously plays into the decision right enough.
Do we think that's the main reason that the story is structured that way? Because in any normal story, the Doctor would lose a few of the less important guest characters, and then the one that we've grown to like most would be the one that he would save. And here, having gone through the cycle several times, and you get to the point where normally this is what would Rita being in peril be the thing that inspires him to save the day. We get another iteration. And do you think that's mostly done just to be surprising, just because Toby doesn't want his stories to be quite as formulaic as your average Doctor Who, or is it to make the Doctor extra, get him into the right emotional state for the end of the story?
I'll tell you what's refreshing in the Moffat era is that a character who dies stays dead. I'm not particularly morbid, and I've never really seen the need for a lot of people to die in the course of a drama to make it more dramatic. But I do think that if you're going to kill someone off, you at least deserve the decency of keeping them dead and making that moment mean something, rather than trying to play on people and say, oh, it means something, and also look, we've brought them back as well. So you've not only have you had that the moment where you suffered loss, but everything's okay now, because which isn't, of course, our experience of life. It always seemed dishonest to me that, and this is a more honest approach that when something awful happens, it is awful and it stays being awful.
No, I agree absolutely about that. It is a refreshing change, and not as someone with a great bloodlust either, but it's just like, if you're going to, I don't mind perils of Pauline type situations where people escape, with one, in the absolute nick of time. That's the stuff that Doctor Who is made of. But I do, and I've always somewhat objected to the bait and switch aspect that has been prevalent in, and it was arguably prevalent in some bits of RTD's series where it was like, this time that the companion is really going to die, but it would always be a metaphorical death or something like that, or there'd be some get out, with prophecies, etc., etc. And then in the Moffat era, where it became more explicit that, quite often we did apparently see major characters die and then have them come back. Paul, in answer to what you were asking about, whether it was one thing or the other, I guess the trite thing is to say both. It's also worth bearing in mind that Toby would probably have been aware of the success of the Linda with a Y scenario, which was I
was just going to say that, because I can't remember whether it would have been screamingly obvious at the time that Rita was being set up for the same fate, because it is. We have seen it before. I don't think it was. I don't think I did think, well, I can see where this is going. And of course, they do hang a lampshade on it. I'm going to keep saying that now that you've brought it in. I think, is it Rory who says, every time the Doctor starts
of course,
getting attached to something like this, I start thinking, worrying for them. And you think, well, they can't possibly have flagged it up in the dialogue and then follow through on it. But they do. It's the only thing I'm never quite sure about, because... Not so much because I'm in denial about the fact that Rita doesn't make it out, but it also seems to slightly fall into that trope of the peculiar subset of stories where the least pleasant character is the only one who makes it out. I think I referred to this, Voyage of the Damned makes a big deal out of that, doesn't it? Is that the one with the Titanic?
Yes.
Which, and in fact, I think it comes from
the least pleasant actor. No, sorry, I wouldn't want to. I don't want to damn David Williams with being in the same league as Clive Swift. I'm sure David Williams is a lovely bloke.
I think the last time we discussed this was in the Donald Trump episode from the most recent series, back on 13 Cast, where we were wondering why Chris Chibnall let this person escape the story seemingly not having learnt any lessons, let alone gone unpunished. But that was baffling then, and it still is. Here, I don't think Toby's making any particular point about the fact that, what's his name? Gibbis? Gibbis. His cowardice and self-interest allows him to survive, but that's just an observation. It's not the moral of the story. It's just honest.
So I wrote down some of the dialogue at the end about the faith thing. So what the Doctor says is, it's not fear, it's faith. Not just religious faith in something. They all believe there's something guiding them about to save them. That's what it replaces. Every time someone was confronted with their most primal fear, they fell back on their most fundamental faith. And all this time I've been telling you to dig deep, find the thing that keeps you brave, and made you expose your faith, show them what they needed. So, yeah, interesting. So I suppose what the Doctor is saying there is that, on the one hand, the faith that those characters have had is the thing that has sustained them thus far, and it's been a positive, well, potentially positive anyway, influence on their life. And then this character has come in and grabbed hold of it and used it as and amplified it so that they lose the sense of what they originally had faith in and place it in this bull-like character. Does it get a name? I can't remember. Or is it just the thing?
Don't think it gets a name.
I don't think it does, no.
No. Just that it's a cousin of the Nimon or something like that. Yeah. So I guess, where Russell, I suppose, has seen in Gridlock the power of faith to keep people going in a dark situation, regardless, I suppose, of whether there's any content in that faith. In this case, it seems that Toby has a sort of darker view of, and I guess we see it all around us at the moment that people take that, the faith that people have, and they sort of screw with it. And certainly we see now that with the current political situation in this country, people have kind of lost a sense of what the original situation was, and now all they have really is faith either in Brexit or the European Union, and I mean, that's not true of everybody, but there are a lot of people who've taken a side, and now all that's left is the side rather than the original reason that they had for picking the side. And it does seem that there's maybe something of that in the ultimate end for these people, that the faith that they had in the thing that was important to them has been lost, and now all they have is the damaging faith, the blind faith.
And to extend the metaphor, it's that void can be filled by unscrupulous people who know that the public needs something, that people need something to believe in, and they will give them something, but for their own ends.
Indeed, yeah.
So Dominic Cummings is a Minotaur.
Well, certainly he understands the oeuvre into which the Minotaur is playing, yeah.
Oh, blimey. Plenty of food for thought there.
And I guess Toby knew, well, he didn't, I'm not saying he could predict the future, but he could see where some of this stuff ends up.
Very, very clever. So it works on two levels. It works he was asked to fulfill a specific function for this story in this slot in this season, but drew a wider theme out of it as well. And that's why he should have been the showrunner. But perhaps he still will be. I have faith. I have faith in Toby Woodhouse. Less faith in the BBC controllers to appoint him.
And interestingly, that the God complex, Rita announces this, is the Doctor feeling that he can solve any problem, and it's
yes.
I mean, I suppose there's a 2 or 3 meanings, but this is the one that's brought out in the script.
Yes, and of course Nimon, has a power complex gag as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Yes,
that fits, as Romana pithily says.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, it shows Toby is clearly a proper fan of Nimon, I think.
Well, do you know, are we going to move on to the links then?
Well, why not?
You apparently found hundreds, so should we do one each and then let you finish them off? Actually, no. Here's one that isn't a link. In the God complex, it's made clear that the hotel is a prison, which is a link to the original Minotaur myth.
Yes.
So that's not a link with the Horns of Nimon, where it's more, I don't know, it's a temple come scientific laboratory, but in no sense a prison. It just visually resembles one.
Indeed.
Can I ask, there was a line early on in the God complex which went past quite quickly and I didn't write it down. Do they refer to the fact that the layout of the hotel is changing? That it's fluid?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So that is a link again with Horns of Nimon, where
It
we
is.
have what is, I believe is called in mazeology, a dynamic maze.
Oh, okay.
Now, I assumed, because to be honest, I'm more of a Doctor Who fan than I am a student of classical mythology. I kind of assumed that the original Minotaur labyrinth from the Greek myths must have been a dynamic maze. It sounds like something that the canny Greeks might have invented. A maze where you turn around and it's not as it was. But from all the research I've done, it doesn't look like the original myth did incorporate that element.
Well, it wouldn't have worked with the string, would it?
Not
Or
that
whatever
I've
it
ever.
was.
Yes.
No. So I'm not saying that Anthony Reid invented the idea of dynamic maze, but he grafted that concept onto the Minotaur in the labyrinth for Horns of Nimon. And thus, to the limited extent to which it appears in the God complex, that's again something Toby's brought from Nimon, not from the Minotaur myth.
Yeah, and what I like about that is that in the Horns of Nimon, I mean, it's used, but it's not used terribly effectively, and you've got that sort of stupid moment when Seth and Tika get separated, but I mean, honestly, how could she not see that the wall was coming? She's about 3 yards away from him, and then somehow allows.
But I just realised, as you were asking that, I just realised the answer to that, which is it's the same as the door that's not a door, or the wall that's the door.
At the end when they
Yes.
can't see the exit.
So their projection's not. I
Right.
suspect that the reconfiguration is
It's
down to
instantaneous.
projections rather than. So it's not like a big
Okay.
chunk of wall sliding over. It's just like
Okay.
something turns on and there appears to suddenly be a blank wall behind you.
Okay.
That would be my. That's me. That's me saving the phenomenon, as it were.
I like that because it makes it seem less stupid.
And of course, that's also somewhat referenced, flipped on its head with the scene shortly after they arrive in the God Complex with the door that's not a door, and so on, with
Yes.
the blank walls and so on. You could argue that's kind of taking that same little thing and just referencing it slightly.
Sure. I mean, what I like is that in the God Complex they take that idea, which is realised somewhat poorly in Horns of Nimon. Great idea, not necessarily all that visually well represented, and with the more modern technology and with better direction, suddenly it becomes a much more interesting concept. You get the kind of the weird angles, the fact that nobody's quite sure where anything is. The TARDIS disappears, or is that behind a wall? It suddenly becomes more of a thing and more of a present danger. Yeah, but yes, obviously a link between those two.
Can I just ask a couple of specific things with regards to the God Complex? Personally, for me, I found 11 to be a bit grating here compared to the experience of rewatching Cold Blood.
Right.
Like for our previous one, which was season 5, Matt, and I found him constantly fascinating and interesting, and whereas this seemed to be, to me, rather more,
Has it developed too many tawdry quirks?
Yes, to be honest, it's what I always feel about as soon as the writers get a handle on what the actor's doing, they start writing it into the script, and then the performance just becomes larger and somewhat more predictable.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But there are some lovely bits though. I mean, the only bit that really sort of stood out to me was the little bit where he's warning off Gibbous about
Yes.
he kind of bends over and whispers in his ear, and you think, yeah, that's the 11th Doctor that I really liked and found fascinating in Series 5.
It's kind of the apogee of the kind of all the worst aspects of the Moffat era this season, isn't it? In that almost incomprehensible season finale which we're building up to, but just generally Amy and Rory and the Doctor have all become a bit too set in their ways and a bit too quirky and a bit too cute, and I mean, I think on the whole it doesn't come off too badly in the story. I don't think it spoils the story, but it is. You're right. It is that kind of period in where things are getting a bit over the top. There's the line in it where he's trying to get rid of Amy's faith, and he says, "I'm not a hero. I really am just a madman in a box." But the way that he does it again is slightly over the top, and I don't know. I mean, I can't see too many other of the Doctors describing themselves as a madman in a box. I mean, they might describe themselves as maybe unworthy of hero worship. You can certainly imagine Davison having some sort of a speech in that regard. But yeah, a madman in a box is a little bit too.
It's a bit too much of a T-shirt moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Rory has about 4, doesn't he? I think there were about 3 or 4 gags related to Amy beating up Rory.
Yes.
I was thinking, okay,
yes.
Once was funny, but that's give it a rest. But
yeah. She hit me with a shoe. Her foot was inside at the time or something. Yeah.
Paul, are you? I sensed you've gone silent, and I sensed a sigh at the start of that.
I was just enjoying you ripping it all apart.
An expression of surprise. Sorry, I don't want to wail on it, but it was just something slightly negative that grated with me. And the other question was, did the Doctor's door thing ever pay off?
It did. Yes, but
it does.
With hindsight,
but not well.
With hindsight, it's clearly a retcon, as the fans would say. I'm not imagining this, am I, Richard? It's revealed to be Amy's crack in there.
It is.
Eventually.
It is Amy's crack. But the one in their bedroom rather than the other one.
What should, again, with that in mind, the Doctor says, when he opens the door, he says sadly, of course, who else?
Who
He
else?
does.
He
yes.
says, who else?
Who
And
else?
so that's nonsense. What it should be, of course, is the War Doctor,
Yes.
which would have worked very nicely.
Yeah.
But it wasn't.
Yeah, and I think if Toby Whithouse had anything in mind, it wasn't the crack. But I mean, he may well not have had anything in mind, and it's rather a nice line. Who else? You know, I mean,
Helen Mirren.
you don't really need to know who it is.
Well, I think I always assumed it was some aspect of the Doctor himself.
Yes,
in the
yes,
same
it was.
sense that in Amy's Choice, it's
It was
revealed
the Doctor,
that
yeah,
the thing he hates most is himself, which
Yes.
is where I was trying to nick the tawdry quirks line from, unless I misquoted
Oh
it.
yes, of course. Yeah. No, I got it from somewhere. But yes. Yeah. Sorry. Getting back to. Sorry to divert us there from looking at connections and.
No, I think it's a good discussion.
So we've done a lot of connections, quite a few disconnects, haven't we? Is there anything? Have we?
Have we exhausted this, Richard? Did you have anything else on your?
I'm just trying to
Little
think.
list.
So we've killed the faith thing to death. We've got the moving walls. We've got the it's a bit like the Nimon. So this isn't necessarily a connection. We've got this also very Moffat-y bit at the end, an ancient creature drenched in the blood of the innocent, drifting in space through an endless shifting maze. For such a creature, death would be a gift. Then accept it and sleep well. I wasn't talking about myself. I don't know. It's almost like Les Dawson rather than this beast. I don't know. It's another one of these slightly too obvious comments. You know, it's like a line out of "Have I Got News for You" or something, where they're obviously trying to take you one direction, but before they say I wasn't talking about myself, you can see where it's going.
Yeah. Oh, you cynic.
Apparently, it's the first line that Whithouse wrote for the story.
Was it?
Apparently, yes.
Okay.
But I suppose it's a mission statement for the story. I guess you then know what you're building to, so that you can do a silly bait and switch gag about the Doctor.
So what's this taunt us? We often end up, on this show, we sometimes end up searching desperately for connections between stories where there's only something very tenuous. Other times there's something very obvious, and it's so obvious that there's nothing really very profound to get out of it. But I think here we've got a nice mixture of all of those things. There is a genuine connection between the two stories, which we've elaborated. The production differences between the two eras are pretty obvious. We barely need to go into that. The fact that these stories are linked, but the warlike invading Nimon of the 70s have been replaced by the monster that is as much to be pitied as censured of the 21st century is possibly the most obvious difference when it comes to telling the same story decades apart. Is that the main thing you have to change nowadays? Well, I mean, you don't have to.
I guess it's interesting. I mean, you talk about the production values that clearly you can see, if as much as anything, what the God complex shows you is that if everyone is pulling in the same direction, what you can get from the plot is quite extraordinary, and you wonder if Anthony Reid's script had the help that Toby Whithouse has got, and Toby Whithouse had the cast who couldn't care quite as much about it, and the director who didn't seem to be all that focused, whether we'd now be looking at these and saying, yes, the masterpiece that was the Horns of Nimon and the God Complex didn't quite live up to the same promise. It's possible.
I think that's entirely possible. Absolutely. I think with less sympathetic hands, a lot of the power of the God Complex would have fallen away, and with more sympathy, the Horns of Nimon would have built upon what I forgot to mention earlier, which is that it is, if you just write a one-line description of the plot about evil alien aggressors invading another planet, but it's a new take on that. It's a silent invasion. It's even a new take on the silent invasion. I think the gag of having the aliens pretending to just be one while they're silently amassing is pretty unique. And like I said, it has quite a lot of atmosphere, but it could have had, if it was made again now, I think it could be just as unnerving.
It's interesting. These are aliens that actually look like clones. I mean, maybe they're not supposed to be clones, but they look more like clones than the Sontarans do, don't they?
Do any of you remember Animal Kwackers? ITV lunchtime children's program from the mid-70s. The Nimon, I think it's been said before, but they do look a lot like the slightly tatty costumes from Animal Kwackers, which is a cheap British imitation of the banana splits.
Yeah.
So whether the banana splits...
Rory, tell us a story, yeah?
Yep. Yes, I showed my wife an episode of Animal Kwackers the other week. It's a cruel and unusual punishment. She hasn't recovered since.
Right. She wasn't party to it at the time.
Anybody who who doesn't know what I'm talking about and for some reason would like to, just Google Rory from Animal Kwackers, and Nimon.
Yeah.
And then do that private eye thing where you pretend that they're interchangeable.
Yes. Well, you never know, Paul. You may find that in our future publicity we do exactly the same thing.
It's not just that it's a tall actor in a tatty outfit, but that they're wearing platform heels. That's the point. Because they're the characters in Animal Kwackers, sorry, I didn't quite get where I was going with that, are all supposed to be members of they're animals that are members of a glam rock group. And the Nimon are clearly wearing the most extraordinary high heels and look like members of Sweet or...
I mean, let's face it,
Mud,
we never get to find out what the Nimon get up to in their spare time, and they may well be glam rockers.
They could explain a lot. Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm using Google image search and having flashbacks at the moment. I think I've opened my own personal room in the God complex. I found what might be sitting in there.
Well, on that
lion.
Yeah, I'm afraid that therapy doesn't come complimentary with this. I'm afraid so. Yeah, as Douglas Adams would say, any problems you've still got are entirely your own. Yeah. Okay, well, look, thanks both of you for that chat about those two stories. I think that's interesting, and I think our listeners will have had an interesting time listening to that and coming up with their own theories.
That's so.
I guess a couple of things that I wanted to say to the listeners out there in podcast land. So the first is, I mean, we genuinely would like to hear from you. I mean, we've mentioned it maybe a couple of times, and there hasn't been a lot of feedback. Yeah, I mean, so the sketch alluded to it. I mean, it does sometimes feel like we're talking to nobody other than ourselves, and for all we know, that's exactly what's happening. Although Podbean does bung up some numbers every now and then to suggest that, in fact, other people have been downloading it. But, of course, they could have been downloading it and not listening, or, in fact, it could just be an algorithm that produces vaguely plausible numbers to keep us reassured and keep churning it out.
It's true. It's in their interest.
The money every month, yeah. So, yeah, if you are out there and you are in any way enjoying it or even hating it, it'd be nice to hear from you to tell us what it is that you've indeed liked or not liked about it. Also, I think if you are by some miracle enjoying it, and if you haven't actually switched off by now, it would also be great if you could tell other people about it. Insofar as we're moderately relieved that the numbers aren't terrible, it would be even more reassuring for us if they were slightly better than they are. So yeah, I mean, the more people that get to listen to it, the more we feel enthusiastic to keep going with it, and the more of this kind of garbage will continue to churn out. So
this has to be the most diffident sales drive I've ever had.
Oh gosh, it's the best you're going to get from me. My dad was a salesman, you never would realise it from my efforts. Any messages from the other pair of you?
Do you want to solicit? How about a competition? Let's try and solicit some comments. If anybody has an idea for a Something Who compare and contrast session, if you think you can do better than the tenuous links we make, send them in on the back of a postcard or stamped or sealed down envelope, and we promise to ignore them. No, we promise to. If we use any of your ideas, we'll
yes, please tweet us. Yes,
attribute them.
Yeah.
We can't guarantee to return them, but there is a price for everyone that we show. No, we will call out your name. Yeah.
And yes.
Giles, Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure as always.
Well, indeed. Yep. I've enjoyed it. It's gave me a chance to rewatch a couple of things that I wouldn't have necessarily picked off the shelf immediately otherwise. Yeah.
What's next? Do we know?
Well, we're homing in on November,
Ooh.
Which, you know, in Doctor Who land always has a special.
Doesn't ring any bells to me, does it?
So I was thinking that we might go on a bit of an anniversary story bent. So yeah, I mean, maybe dust off your copies of 3 and 5 Doctors.
Ooh. Okay.
Oh, and of course for the new series, Day of the Doctor, and we might do a
threesome
triple episode.
Triple whammy.
But probably not all in one go, because that might be too much for anyone to cope with. But yeah, maybe split over a couple of shows.
Right. So, thank you, listener. We'll see you here in November.
Indeed. So, it's bye from me, Richard.
And it's bye from me, Giles.
Well, are you really making me do this? And it's goodbye from me, Paul.
It's entirely your own choice.
Okay. I recant that previous exclamation.
Good. So then there'll be the outro music, and then no doubt we'll pick some of the worst things that we came up with in the course of the episode and bung those at the end, and that'll be that.
But
Tish.
An hour and 45. That's all right. We should edit it down to about an hour and a half.
So much for it being a short one.
Well,
whose fault was that?
It's about right. I think about an hour and a half is about right for something who.
Yeah.
You know, we can. Well, I mean, we did a short one with the Terrence Sticks thing, but it's not really our style, particularly when we start talking about stories.
You missed a trick there. I mean, even though it wasn't obituary, you should have done a compare and contrast with him and another writer. A better one. No, a worse one. Preferably a worse one.
I thought it was interesting, actually, the Robert Sherman thing, the story that you told about Terrence Sticks. I mean, Terrence obviously lived with that awful speech impediment all his life, in the same way that Robert Sherman had to overcome his, which I presume made him much more conscious of and prepared to tolerate Rob's when it came to it. But yeah, that was interesting. I mean, you know, we've all done our Terrence Dicks impression, but it kind of cast it in a slightly different light for me.
Oh, is it me? Right.
Oh, so it is. Yeah.
Hang on. Didn't work.
Gargling with whiskey, or just necking one to get ready for the.
Right, there goes. Was that all right? I just realised I changed a word as I came to the what. I changed it to our what because it suddenly struck me.
Sorry, where's this?
You said you say our listener maybe trying to recreate the source of our creativity, and I was supposed to say the what, and I just said our what. Which
it sounded very natural, and
yes,
it was yes.
I think
I mean, fundamentally that's a case of poor authorship.
Okay, well, as long as you're happy with that, love.
So we'll do it another time, but I'm sure we'll go with that take.
Okay.